You know, Rob, Tenet has been one of these films that has had a little bit of drama going on around it, right? It's had a bit of drama going on around it. Now, the drama continued on this morning when we started seeing that on Regal's website started listing, there was no official announcement at the time, but Regal's website started listing Tenet releasing in their theaters on September 4th,
John,
which is a little bit sooner than I think some of us have heard about. However, that has evolved a little bit because there is now word coming out. Now, let's take one step back for a second. Let's take one step back for just a quick second. Going back about a week or so, when Tenet got moved, we remember the officials at Warner Brothers said that, we may approach our release on Tenet a little bit differently than our regular traditional release. Because, of course, traditionally they put it out in the Americas first, then other places around the world, or at least at the same time and stuff like this. And we weren't really clear about what they meant by, we're going to do it a little bit differently this time. Well, apparently, now we do know what they meant by that. Because Deadline has just released that Tenet is set to release in 70 countries, not including the US, 70 countries to begin opening by the end of August, followed, now this kind of confirms that story about what Regal put up on their site, followed by a US release over Labor Day weekend. So they have reset a new Tenet release date, and it seems like they're doubling down on this release date right now, saying 70 countries across the world by the end of August. So we're talking in a month. And then they're going to put out in the US over Labor Day weekend. Now, Rob, you and I have learned in the pandemic era that the best laid plans of mice and men doesn't often mean anything. They have set and reset the Tenet release date a number of times, only to move it again later. Yes, now they're saying that it's going to get this international release, which is fantastic, to be followed by the US markets in September. Grand. But again, the pandemic may have plans of its own. Rob, let me ask you this. Number one, what do you think about this announcement that's come out? But number two, let's say, for argument's sake, that things continue to get worse in the United States because we seem to be a bumbling bunch of idiots not knowing how to handle this thing when other countries have. But let's say things continue to get worse in the United States. Do you think that Warner Brothers at this point goes, well, if we can't release it in the US yet, then we can't release it in the US yet. We're still keeping that end of August in whatever other markets around the world we can. So overall thoughts on this, and do they stick with that international release even if they can't make the early September release for the United States?
Well, I think, I was talking with a friend of mine about this last night, and he pointed something out that was interesting. When the James Bond movie Spectre came out, the last Bond film, 5 years ago now, 77% of its box office take was foreign, non-US. 77%. That's a pretty big percentage. And if like a lot of the countries around the world, friends of mine in Germany went and saw Unhinged, the Russell Crowe film. Theaters are opening. People are getting back into doing business. I mean, we'll see. But I think that they're going to move forward and open this movie, whether it can go in the US or not. Now, what's going to be interesting is if it sticks on this release date, this is going to be a case study of a number of different things. Where COVID's at worldwide, obviously, we'll see what happens when people start going to movie theaters, because of all the movies, this is the movie that's going to get, I think, the most people to come see it. I mean, this is going to, even if the theaters are only half full, I think this movie is going to be, I don't remember a movie that's not true, Endgame probably, but people are excited about this movie and they're going to go. I know you and I might, if California doesn't open, we might have to take a road trip somewhere, a day trip cross state lines. I don't know, figure out where the best theaters that we can see it in is, because I really want to see this. Labor Day weekend is not that far off. And it's, 30, 40 days off maybe? And I hope so. It's up to us. It's ours to lose. Maybe if everybody wears masks for the next month, we can crush this down. But it's going to be an interesting case study to see how this works. and how the box office does in our post Corona world. So I'm curious to see what happens.
We talked about the New Mutants the other day, and we talked about how I think there's actually a decent chance because, they just had their Comic-Con panel and they said, we're still releasing on August 28th. Well, that's only a few days removed from when Tenet says they're coming out. And, you and I speculated the other day that, I think there's actually a decent chance they keep that release date because I think with New Mutants, there's a situation of we just got to get this thing out. And I kind of feel like they might just release it August 28th in whatever theaters they can, whether that's a bunch of them or not, and just say, there, we've done our theatrical release. I don't think you can apply that same philosophy to Tenet. It's just too much of a bigger film with a much higher budget and a lot more riding on it. But I could very well see, I agree with you. I can very well see them going, you know what? This isn't how we would have done it normally. And this is something that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. But I think they're in a position now that they'll go, yeah, look, if we've got 70, 60, 50 countries that we can release it in, we're going to release it and then we'll just release it in the US when we can. I think they're just getting that up to that point.
Yeah, and I also think, I've been thinking a lot about this, that with our crazy world that we're now living in, I think there's going to be a lot of people that might not necessarily run out to the movies who might go out to the movies just to have a sense of something in their lives that's relatively normal. If they're safe and they wear masks and they practice social distancing and they use hand sanitizer or whatever, I think people are now at a point. I mean, by then we're going to be 6 months into a lockdown and all of this. And I think people are going to want to go, man. I know I want to go. Like we just talked about as we opened the show. That I want to go back to a movie theater. Right. I want to see Tenet on the big screen.
I just think there are safe ways to do it. Again, there is no way to eliminate risk. There's just not. There's no way but there is ways to minimize risk. And listen, I know a lot of people said to me, well, John, I don't know what the point is of opening up the theaters because no one's going to go. Guess what? The moment they opened restaurants, lineups. The responsible restaurants had little X's that were 6 feet apart, social distancing, only had so many tables open, all that kind of stuff. But the moment restaurants were open, people flocked to the restaurants. The moment beaches in some places were open, people flocked to the beaches. The moment hair salons were open, people flocked to get their hair cut. I mean, I was one of those. I believe that once they open up the theaters, it's going to just be important and incumbent that unlike a lot of restaurants which didn't do it responsibly, unlike a lot of beaches that didn't do it responsibly, if the movie theaters can be really committed to doing it responsibly, I think you're going to see a lot of people coming out because I think you're right, Rob. I think people are just yearning for that sense of normalcy again. And whether that's New Mutants on August 28th or whether that's going to be Tenet in late August in a lot of countries or September 4th in the US, we'll have to wait and see. Question here for you guys is, what do you think about this? I believe this is the 4th release date for Tenet. I believe this is the 4th release date to Tenet. Do you think they're going to keep this end of August in European countries and the beginning of September in the US? Do you think they'll do one without the other if they need to? Jump down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys.